Hi guys, today I'm going to go over conditions for parallelograms. So these are things we're going to do to determine if a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Okay, so there are 4 conditions we can use to tell that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. The first condition, and I'm going to write these down because this is a lot easier if you put these in your notes. Okay, so the first condition is that the opposite sides are congruent. Okay, so those two are opposite sides, and those two are opposite sides. Okay, now condition 2 is both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. Okay, so here's my parallelogram. These two angles are congruent, so those opposite angles, and then these opposite angles are also congruent. Okay. The third condition is that the diagonals bisect each other. So here's my parallelogram. I have these two diagonals and they bisect each other. So these two are congruent. Okay, so those two sides. And then on this diagonal, it is divided in half as well. So those two are congruent. The last condition, okay, is one pair of opposite sides are both parallel and congruent. Okay, so here is my parallelogram. I have a pair of opposite sides that are both parallel. So these little arrows here mean parallel. And then the tick marks means that they're congruent. So they are the same length. So let's go ahead and apply this and see what happens. Okay. So here I have a quadrilateral. The opposite angles here are not congruent, so this is not necessarily a parallelogram. Okay, they have to be across from each other. Now this one, the diagonals do not divide each other in half. Okay, so it would have to be, this one would need a double tick mark to match that one in order for it to be divided in half. Okay, so now this one, we have opposite sides are parallel, and we have to figure out if they are congruent, because we're really looking at this one right here. Okay, now these angles here are congruent, so angle DBC is congruent to angle ACB. Okay, that means that because these angles are congruent, the sides opposite them, so across from C would be the side AB, so this side is congruent to this side. So this one is actually a parallelogram. If my angles were on the other sides there, this would not have worked. Okay, now we have opposite sides are parallel, but not necessarily congruent. Okay, we know that this opposite sides are congruent, but we don't know that those two are as well. So this is not necessarily congruent. Okay, let's go ahead and do another set. Okay, so I have this parallelogram here. This is like the last one of the last one that we did. It's not necessarily a parallelogram, although these two are parallel. We don't know that they are congruent. We have this parallelogram. The diagonals do not bisect each other, okay, because this one is not equal to that one. So it's not necessarily a parallelogram. We have this one, okay. We have opposite sides are parallel, okay. And then we have these angles, remember, like I talked about in my last one. I have these angles are across from the parallel sides. Therefore, these are congruent. Okay, so this one is a parallelogram. Let's look at this last one. Okay, so these are not necessarily congruent. They would need to be alternate interior angles congruent. Because the congruent angles are on the same side, this one is not necessarily a parallelogram. Okay. All right. And I'm going to stop there and let you guys figure it out. My best suggestion is to copy these conditions down into your notes. That'll be the biggest help with this.